She was only 8 years old, and that night, while helping her mother clean a millionaire's apartment, she saw something no child should ever see. A scream cut through the silence, and in seconds, the richest man in town was lying on the floor, betrayed by the person he trusted most. Frightened, the girl tried to understand what she was seeing. But what she didn't know was that hidden in her memory was the only clue capable of revealing the whole truth. From that night on, the cleaning lady's daughter and the betrayed man would be forever linked. For a hidden secret, where the eagle in the painting can't see, but the floor rat can. And what began as a crime would turn into something none of them expected. The cold lights of the hallway reflected off the waxed floor, creating an almost ghostly glow. 8-year-old Mia walked beside her mother, Helena, who pushed the cleaning cart, her exhaustion etched on her face. It was just another early morning in the building where she had worked for years, cleaning up the silent traces of wealthy people. Mia observed everything with fascination, the luxury, the paintings, the carpets, and wondered what it would be like to live there. While Helena was cleaning the floor, Mia approached a wall covered in old portraits. One of them, the largest, showed a golden eagle flying over mountains. The girl, curious, touched the frame, feeling the coldness of the metal under her small fingers. That's when a soft yet firm voice echoed behind her. "Do you like the painting?" It was Alexander, the owner of the apartment, watching her with a slight smile. Helena hurried nervously, apologizing, but Alexander simply raised his hand, reassuring her. He knelt before Mia, looking her in the eyes, and said, "Do you know that every painting has a secret? This one, for example, holds something that only the most attentive notice." The girl's eyes widened, enchanted. The CEO, accustomed to dealing with shareholders and figures, felt a rare calm when talking to that child. He then confided in a conspiratorial tone, "If I am ever in danger, I will hide my treasures where the eagle in the painting can't see, but the floor rat can." Mia smiled, finding the mysterious phrase amusing. Helena thanked him for his kindness and tried to end the conversation, but Alexander insisted on giving her a chocolate bar, saying, "For the little guardian of secrets." Hours later, as mother and daughter were about to leave, Mia looked one last time at the eagle painting. The scene of luxury, silence, and the man's kindness remained etched in her memory. She couldn't imagine that within a few days that same place would become the setting for a nightmare. The serene air of that early morning concealed the prelude to something dark about to happen. If you believe that even in the darkest stories there can be a thread of hope, subscribe to the channel now. Here, each story will remind you that kindness can still change destinies. The next week, night fell like a heavy cloak over the building. Helena was cleaning Alexander's office, while Mia discreetly fiddled with a notepad. The clock was almost midnight when a muffled noise echoed from the hallway. Quick, tense footsteps. Helena looked up, but thought it was a security guard. Mia, however, felt her heart clench. Curious, she hid behind the half-open office door and peeked. The butler, Thomas, elegant as always, entered the main room. But there was something different about him, his hard gaze, his brusque gestures. Right behind him came Alexander, looking tired, with an envelope in his hands. "I trusted you, Thomas," said the CEO, his voice firm. The butler replied disdainfully, "And that was your mistake."
In an instant, the once refined atmosphere became a scene of violence. Thomas pushed Alexander against the table, snatching the envelope from his hands. The dry sound of the impact echoed through the apartment. Mia, trembling, put her hand to her mouth, fighting not to scream. Helena, in another room, heard nothing, only the distant hum of the vacuum cleaner. Alexander tried to fight back, but a blow knocked him down. The valuable seal, the cause of the conflict, fell to the ground and gleamed in the light. Thomas, in despair, picked it up and fled through the side door, leaving behind silence and blood. Mia ran to the fallen man's body, tears streaming down her face. Young man, wake up!" she whispered, shaking him with her small hands. Helena rushed in and screamed when she saw the scene. She called emergency services, her hands trembling so much she could barely dial. While they waited for the paramedics, Mia looked again at the eagle painting, now stained with blood. Alexander's words echoed in her mind, "Where the eagle doesn't see, the floor rat does." An enigma, a warning, and the beginning of something much bigger than she could comprehend. The sound of sirens cut through the luxurious silence of the building as Helena squeezed Mia's hand tightly. Alexander's motionless body was placed on the stretcher. Mia watched, silent, her eyes brimming with tears. The blood on the CEO's hands stained his white shirt like a cruel reminder of what she had just witnessed. It all seemed like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. When the police arrived, the questioning began. Helena tried to answer between sobs, but Mia, nervous, interrupted. "It was the butler! He hit the young man!" The police officers exchanged skeptical glances. A child talking about a crime in the apartment of one of the richest men in the city. One of them, in a paternalistic tone, simply said, "Calm down, young lady. You must be mistaken." Helena, fearing she would lose her job, tried to silence Mia. "Don't talk about it, honey. They'll sort it out." But the girl insisted, convinced, pointing out details that only someone there could know. The sound of the clock breaking, the picture shaking, the stamp falling off. Even so, the police officers wrote down very little. The word of a poor child didn't carry much weight there. As the ambulance drove away, Mia felt the emptiness leave a hole in her chest. The image of Alexander wounded haunted her. "Is he going to die, Mom?" she asked in a trembling voice. Helena took a deep breath and lied. "Of course not, my daughter. The rich always survive." But inside her, fear and guilt mingled silently. In the following days, the matter was hushed up. The newspaper reported only that CEO Alexander had suffered a domestic robbery. Thomas disappeared. Helena received a discreet warning: don't mention anything to anyone. Meanwhile, Mia, alone with her thoughts, kept repeating the phrase Alexander had told her, the enigma that now seemed to hold the key to the truth.
The hospital room smelled of ether and uncertainty. Alexander, pale, slowly opened his eyes, confused by the bright lights and the constant beeping of the monitors. For a few seconds, he didn't know where he was. Then, flashes of the assault returned. The blow, Thomas's face, the fading glow of the seal. He tried to move, but the pain made him groan. A nurse reassured him, saying he was safe. When Helena entered the room, hesitant, she seemed to shrink before the patient's imposing presence. I just came to thank you for being alive, sir," she said, almost in a whisper. Alexander turned his face and asked, "And the little girl, the little guardian?" Helena was surprised. He remembered Mia even after the trauma. That afternoon, Mia timidly entered the room holding a crumpled flower. "Hi, young man. Do you remember me?" Alexander smiled weakly but sincerely. "Of course I remember. You're the one who saw what the adults didn't want to see." His gaze was of gratitude and respect. For the first time, someone took the girl seriously. Between pauses and pangs of pain, Alexander recounted what he remembered: the stamp, the coup, the traitor. But the detail of the clue remained a mystery. Mia, excited, repeated the words he himself had said about the eagle and the rat. The CEO listened attentively, and for the first time since the attack, frowned, as if discovering something crucial. "That phrase, I was the one who said it, wasn't I?" he asked, intrigued. "Yes, it was, and I never forgot it," the girl replied. Alexander, thoughtfully, murmured, "Then perhaps I myself left a message for the future." Helena didn't understand, but something changed in that instant. The powerful man and the simple girl now shared a secret and a mission. Back in his apartment after weeks of recovery, Alexander walked slowly through the hallways that had once exuded power. Now the silence had a different sound, the echo of distrust. Helena and Mia accompanied him, still unable to believe they were there at his invitation. "You saved me," Alexander said sincerely. "If it weren't for your daughter's courage, I wouldn't be alive." Mia looked around with curious and attentive eyes. The same picture of the eagle was still hanging, slightly crooked. "It was here that I saw everything," she said, pointing to the table where the attack had taken place. Alexander approached, analyzing the spot with a clinical gaze. "The eagle doesn't see, the floor rat does," he murmured, repeating the riddle. With the help of a flashlight, they began to investigate every detail. Under the painting, the wooden baseboard looked newer than the rest of the floor. Mia, kneeling, ran her fingers along the corner and felt a crack. "Look here!" she exclaimed. Alexander bent down and with a screwdriver removed a small board. Inside, he found a tiny, empty drawer.
"This is where I hid the seal," he said, surprised. "But someone found it first." The mystery deepened. If Thomas had taken the seal, why had he left the replica in its place? Doubt gnawed at Alexander, who was beginning to understand that the betrayal had been planned long ago. Before they left, Mia looked again at the painting of the eagle. "It sees everything from up there, but it doesn't see what's close to the ground," she said innocently. Alexander smiled. "That's why I need you, little one. You see what the powerful don't." And there, amidst the dust of the floor and the gleam of gold, an unlikely alliance was born between a CEO and a girl with attentive eyes. In the following days, Alexander and Mia began gathering information. He revisited old documents and employee lists, while she, curious and patient, helped him observe details that the adults ignored. Helena, for her part, tried to keep her distance. She feared that getting close to her boss would cause problems. On a rainy afternoon, Alexander found an old receipt hidden in an office drawer, a transfer to a non-existent company. "Thomas was always careful, but he left traces," he commented. Mia, who was silently watching him, noticed something scribbled on the back of the paper, a phone number and the word antiquarian. Following the lead, Alexander discreetly called. On the other end, a hoarse voice replied, "We don't do business over the phone here." The tone was evasive, suspicious. Alexander hung up and looked at Mia. "I think we're getting close." The girl smiled with that courage that only children possess, a mixture of fear and curiosity. Meanwhile, Helena began to feel the weight of the decision. An anonymous note left on the door read, "Stop meddling where you don't belong." She wanted to give up, but when she looked at her daughter sleeping on Alexander's sofa, she realized that the bond between them was already stronger than her fear. That night, Alexander wrote something in his diary. "The stamp may be worth millions, but Mia's life is worth more than any treasure. For the first time in years, I feel I'm not alone." And so, the man who had always lived surrounded by luxury began to discover the invisible richness of human connections. The sound of rain hitting the windows of the apartment echoed like a distant memory. Alexander, sitting by the fireplace, was examining old papers when he heard the doorbell ring. Helena went to answer it, and when she opened the door, the world seemed to stop for a moment. It was Thomas. Alive, impeccable, in the same tailored suit, and with the cold gaze that Mia would never forget. "I came to apologize, sir," the butler said in a calm, almost rehearsed voice. "What happened was a misunderstanding." Alexander observed him for a long time, before replying, "A misunderstanding that almost killed me?"
The tension in the air was palpable. Mia, hidden behind the stairs, felt her heart pounding.
Thomas insisted, claiming he had fled out of fear. He said someone was threatening him. The words sounded false, but Alexander, a strategist, decided to keep him close. "Stay, Thomas. I need to understand what really happened," he stated, with a look that concealed more than it revealed. Helena, uneasy, didn't trust him. "Sir, this man is dangerous," she murmured when they were alone. "I know," Alexander replied, "but sometimes you have to let the snake coil before cutting it." He knew the butler hadn't returned out of repentance, but for something even more sinister, the true seal. That night, Mia heard footsteps in the hallway. She peeked through the crack and saw Thomas enter the office. He discreetly moved the eagle painting and began to feel around on the floor. "He's looking for the seal," the girl thought, terrified. Without thinking twice, she ran to Alexander's room and woke him up. "He's in there, young man! He's looking for it!" The CEO jumped up quickly. The shadow game had begun. Thomas was surprised by Alexander in the office. The scene was tense. The sound of rain and the crackling of the fire in the fireplace served as a soundtrack to the silent confrontation. "Did you lose something, Thomas?" asked the CEO, crossing his arms. The butler feigned calm. "Just dusting, sir." Alexander smiled bitterly. "You were always great at covering your tracks." In the corner of the room, Mia watched everything unseen. Suddenly, she noticed that one of the floorboards, near the baseboard, was slightly loose. Curious and observant, she knelt down after they left and ran her finger along it. The wood creaked. With a small push, a crack opened, revealing a rusty iron box. With effort, Mia pulled it out and called Alexander. Inside was a copy of the seal, identical to the original. "So he left a replica," murmured the CEO, perplexed. "The real one is still somewhere." The girl looked him in the eyes and said, "The eagle doesn't see, remember? But the mouse does. Maybe the seal is where nobody looks." Thomas, listening to the conversation through the door, realized he had been discovered and fled. Helena screamed, but it was too late. He vanished down the stairs like a ghost. Alexander called the police, but knew the butler would act again. Now, what had been an investigation had become a battle of patience. That night, Alexander sat on the edge of Mia's bed and said, "You're braver than many adults I know." The girl smiled, still frightened. "I just don't want him to hurt you again." The man smiled and replied, "Now we're a team, little guardian, and together we'll catch that rat." The following morning brought a heavy air of uncertainty. Alexander, even more determined, gathered all the company's financial records and reviewed the transactions made by Thomas in recent months. Each document seemed to hide a secret. Meanwhile, Mia and Helena watched silently as the powerful man acted like a detective in his own labyrinth.
Suddenly, a detail caught the girl's attention. On an old handwritten receipt, there was a small symbol, an eagle with a seal in its claws. "Look, young man, just like the painting." Alexander approached and saw the store's name printed at the top, Orpheus Antique Shop. A shiver ran down his spine. He knew what that meant. Thomas wasn't just trying to sell the stamp. He had connections to an illegal collector's market. "That's where he's going to try to close the deal," Alexander murmured. Helena, terrified, pleaded, "Don't go after that man. He's dangerous." But the CEO calmly replied, "I won't go after him alone." With the help of a friend in the police force, Alexander managed to obtain discreet information. The antique shop was known for shady dealings and operated only at night. Mia, determined to help, insisted on going along. "You said we're a team," she reminded him. Alexander hesitated, but he knew that the girl's intuition had already led them too far to ignore. As night fell, Alexander's black car pulled up in front of the old, dilapidated building. The lights were dim, and a wooden sign creaked in the wind.
Before getting in, he took Mia's hand and said, "If things get dangerous, you run. Understood?" The girl nodded. It was the beginning of the hunt, and nothing would ever be the same after that night. The air inside the antique shop was thick with mold and secrets. Tall shelves crammed with old objects cast shadows on the walls. A man with a gray mustache, the owner, looked at Alexander with a cynical smile. "Looking for something rare, sir?" he asked. Alexander replied coldly, "A stamp, rare but stolen." The antique dealer maintained his smile, but his eyes betrayed his discomfort. "I don't know what you're talking about." It was then that Mia, discreetly exploring the aisles, saw a display case covered by a dark cloth. Lifting the corner, the familiar gleam of the golden seal reflected in her eyes. "I found it," she whispered to herself. Alexander approached and confirmed it was the original. Before he could react, the antique dealer clapped his hands and two men emerged from the shadows. "You should have stayed quiet, Alexander," said a voice that made the CEO freeze. Thomas, the butler, was there, with the same cold look and the arrogance of someone who considered himself invincible. Thomas proudly explained his plan: sell the stamp to an international collector and disappear. "You've always had everything, Alexander. Now it's my turn." The CEO, remaining calm, replied, "And yet you remain a servant of your own hatred." Mia, hidden behind a bookcase, searched for a way out. While the men argued, she discreetly turned on her cell phone and sent a short message to her mother. "Orpheus Antiques, come with the police." The plan was simple, but time was working against them. When Thomas noticed the movement, he smiled and said, "Looks like we have rats in the floor again." Danger lurked, and confrontation was inevitable.
The clock was almost midnight. Inside the antique shop, the atmosphere was stifling. Alexander, surrounded by Thomas and his accomplices, maintained a steady gaze, the expression of a man who had already lost everything and therefore was no longer afraid. "You're not leaving here with that stamp," he said calmly. Thomas laughed, showing the golden gleam between his fingers. Mia, hidden behind a bookshelf, watched the danger grow. Her heart pounded, but her mind worked quickly. She knew the police were on their way, but she also knew they might not arrive in time. "If I don't do anything, he'll hurt the boy again," she thought, clutching the small pendant Alexander had given her weeks before. Thomas began to lose his patience. "You should have stayed lying in that hospital, Alexander. I could have finished the job." Alexander taunted him. "And yet, even with the seal in hand, you're still a petty thief. The real treasure is in courage, and in that, you are poor." The taunt worked. Thomas became enraged and pulled out a gun. Helena arrived at that moment, accompanied by two police officers. "Stop!" one of them shouted. The crack of thunder coincided with the sound of the gun firing. Mia screamed, her body freezing for an eternity. The bullet grazed Alexander's shoulder, who fell, feigning injury, while one of the officers tried to restrain Thomas. In the chaos, Mia ran to the back office where she had seen something before, an old wooden passageway. Thomas noticed and angrily followed her. Helena shouted her daughter's name, but the girl was already hidden in the darkness. "Where the eagle can't see," Thomas murmured, laughing, "but the mouse will pay dearly for hiding." The game of wits was about to reach its climax. The small back room was lit only by slivers of light from the street. Mia tripped over boxes and almost fell, but managed to hide behind an old piece of furniture. The sound of Thomas's footsteps echoed heavily, getting closer and closer. "You're clever, girl, but not clever enough," he said, his voice heavy with contempt and anger.
With her heart racing, Mia remembered Alexander's words, where the eagle in the painting cannot see, but the mouse on the floor can. His eyes scanned the floor and noticed something different, a loose board right in the center. Quickly, she pushed it down and revealed a hollow space. Inside, there was an old metal mechanism, a lever. Without time to think, she pulled it. The sound of ancient gears filled the air, followed by a loud crack. Thomas took a step forward, and the ground beneath his feet gave way. A hidden trap door opened, causing him to fall into a small chamber below, filled with dust and rust. "No!" he cried, gripping the edge, the seal still in his hand. Alexander appeared in the doorway, leaning against the wall, wounded but steady. "Game over, Thomas." The butler looked up, his eyes burning with hatred. "You don't understand. This seal is worth millions. And now it's worth nothing because you lost it." The seal slipped from the villain's fingers and fell into the trapdoor along with him as the police entered the room.
Mia, trembling, ran to Alexander, who hugged her tightly. "You saved us all, little guardian," he said, moved. "You were the one who reminded me of what I had forgotten." Outside, sirens illuminated the falling rain, cleansing the past, washing away the fear. The eagle hadn't seen it, but the floor rat had won. The blue lights of the police cars reflected on the wet asphalt as Thomas was led away in handcuffs, shouting threats that the wind quickly drowned out. The antique shop was shut down, and the curious town began to gossip about the scandal. Alexander, injured, refused the hospital. "I've spent too much time confined to beds. I need to breathe," he said, looking at Mia and Helena. Back in the apartment, the once oppressive atmosphere felt different. The silence now brought peace, not fear. Helena served tea, trying to contain her emotion. "I never thought I'd see this man pay for what he did," she murmured, referring to Thomas. Alexander nodded, tired but relieved. "Justice is sometimes slow, but when it comes, it brings light." In the following days, the headlines spoke of corporate betrayal and million-dollar robbery uncovered by a child. Mia became a small local heroine, even though she didn't understand the magnitude of her courage. "I only did what I thought was right," she would say, with disarming simplicity. Helena, moved, saw in her daughter a strength that she herself thought she had lost. But the price of truth came in silence. Helena was fired, discreetly, without explanation. "You understand, don't you? The company's name needs to be preserved," her superiors said. She simply nodded, holding back her tears. When she told Alexander, he remained silent for long seconds, then replied, "Then it's time to change that." Days later, the CEO called a press conference. Facing the cameras, he spoke about the courage of two ordinary people who had saved his life. "Power only has value when it serves, and sometimes the greatest lessons come from those the world insists on not seeing." Helena and Mia watched the broadcast together, holding hands, crying and smiling at the same time. Months passed, and life began to flourish again. Alexander invited Helena to work directly with him, no longer as a cleaning lady, but as his trusted assistant. "You always took care of what was mine with loyalty. Now I want you to take care of what we will build together," he said, handing her a new name tag. Helena could barely hold back her tears. Mia, for her part, attended a new school thanks to a full scholarship granted by Alexander himself. She told stories to her classmates, always with the same innocence and sparkle in her eyes. "My friend Alexander says that good people can also be strong," she repeated. The CEO, who had previously lived surrounded by cold walls, was now discovering the warmth of a family. One evening, while they were having dinner together, Mia asked, "Young man, why was the stamp so important to you?" He smiled thoughtfully. "Because I thought it represented my father's legacy. But in truth, what he left was a lesson, that the value of things lies in who is by your side when everything falls apart." Helena watched the scene tenderly. For the first time, she saw Alexander not as a boss, but as a man who had learned to feel again. The grief for his lost wife seemed to finally dissolve in Mia's gentle laughter as she called him Uncle Alex. The house, once silent, now vibrated with the sounds of life. On a sunny afternoon, Alexander inaugurated a social project in the girl's name, Guardian Foundation, dedicated to supporting talented children from low-income backgrounds. "This is the true legacy I want to leave," she declared. Mia beside her held the microphone with a shy smile, the same smile that months ago had saved a weary heart. The years passed with the gentleness of the wind on the pages of a book already written. Mia, now an adult, walked with a firm step to the auditorium of a renowned university. She wore a navy blue gown and carried a speech in her hands. On the stage, a golden plaque bore her name, Dr. Mia Helena Duarte, Law and Social Justice. Pride shone in his eyes. Among the guests, Alexander, his hair already white, observed in silence. Time had bent him slightly, but his gaze remained firm and full of life. Beside him, Helena smiled, moved. "She did it," she whispered. He nodded, his eyes welling up with tears. "She was always the little guardian. I only helped her find her own key." When Mia stepped onto the podium, the auditorium fell silent. She took a deep breath and began. "A few years ago, I was just a little girl helping my mother clean empty hallways. It was in those hallways that I discovered two things: that courage doesn't need size, and that life's greatest treasures can't be kept in safes." The words resonated, full of tenderness and truth. As he spoke, an university employee approached Alexander and handed him a small package. Inside was a glass frame with the gold seal, the same one that had once nearly cost him his life. On the back was an handwritten inscription, "For those who taught me that the value of things lies in the heart, not in the safe." Alexander smiled, and discreet tears streamed down his face. When Mia stepped off the stage, she went straight to him and hugged him for a long time. "None of this would exist without you. Without you, I would never have believed that different people could form a family." He replied, his voice trembling, "You gave me something that money could never buy, a reason to keep going." The audience gave them a standing ovation. Helena, moved, looked at the two of them, remembering the night it all began, the blood on the floor, the fear, the secret of the eagle and the rat. Now everything made sense. It wasn't about a seal, but about what it symbolized: trust, loyalty, and love.
After the ceremony, they walked together through the university garden. The sun set behind the tall buildings, tinging the sky orange and gold. Mia handed the seal to Alexander. "Now it's yours again." He smiled and shook his head. "No, it always was yours." In the final scene, the trio walks away among the trees, talking and laughing. The sound of leaves rustling in the wind blends with Mia's voiceover. "A man's true legacy lies not in what he keeps, but in what he leaves in the hearts of others." The camera slowly rises, revealing the horizon, where the eagle and the mouse finally coexist in peace. True inheritance isn't always made of gold. Sometimes it's made of love, courage, and faith. If this story touched your heart, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because here,
Every new video is a living reminder that good still triumphs.